I've been wanting to make this video for a while, mainly because when I was suffering with Hyperemesis gravidarum, I tried to find videos like this with people explaining their experience, and there's just not that many because it's so rare. So I wanted to share my experience. April 28th, 2023, I found out I was pregnant, and I was only 4 weeks along when I found out. For the first week or so, it was kind of mild, just kind of normal nausea, no vomiting. By the way, I'm going to share a lot of TMI. If you clicked on this video, then be prepared, because there is nothing about HG that is not graphic. So fast forward to May 11th, 2023, I was 6 weeks pregnant. At this point, it had become pretty debilitating. It was all day, just throwing up constantly. I kept calling my OB to see if I could get an earlier appointment, because around here, they don't really see you again until you're 10 weeks pregnant for your first ultrasound. And I kept calling and requesting an earlier appointment because I knew something wasn't right. They finally got me in at 7 weeks, and they prescribed me a medication called Reglan. It's an anti-nausea medication, and started taking it that day, and I had an allergic reaction to it. It's supposed to prevent you from vomiting, but it made my throat close up and made me vomit even more, which is a miserable feeling, trying to throw up while your throat is closing up. So that evening I called my OB's emergency line, and they told me to just go to the ER. I, at this point, was so dehydrated that I was having like muscle spasms, and people in the waiting room probably thought that I was having like a seizure because they were so intense. Also, I forgot to mention, at this point, I literally did nothing all day long except just lay flat on the couch. I couldn't sit upright because my blood pressure would drop. I still don't really know what the connection is there with HG, but I know it's pretty common. I could not shower because I could not stand the smell of shampoos and body wash and all that stuff. I tried to get like the unscented stuff, but it still has a smell. I didn't see my kitchen for like 4 months because I just could not tolerate the smell as soon as you walk in there. Like, everything had such a putrid, disgusting smell. I couldn't stand being around people because everyone has a smell. My dogs smelled horrific. I couldn't stand the smell of my clothes because they smelled like laundry detergent. Just everything triggered me. My saliva was like gross to me. I couldn't brush my teeth. Basically, all hygiene went out the window. So when I was in the ER, I couldn't sit up in a chair. I had to lay on the floor flat in the waiting room, which is disgusting. But so they gave me IV fluids, IV Zofran. Zofran is really the #1 drug that they prescribe for HG. I wish they would have started with that, but there's controversy over whether or not that's safe to take in the first trimester. The problem with Zofran in my case was my insurance would only cover a certain amount per month because there's health risks involved with that. One being it can cause like heart palpitations. It can actually cause a permanent heart condition. I don't remember what it's called, but so they would only allow me to get a little bit of Zofran at a time with my insurance. And the amount that they would allow me to get only got me through 4 days. I mean, I still couldn't function when I was on it, but I wasn't vomiting as often. So I went from vomiting like 8 times a day to 4 times a day. Like, it didn't make a huge, huge difference. But when those 4 days passed, I was back at square one. And one thing about HG is you really have to keep it under control with meds, because the second that you miss a dose, it's like the cycle just starts over again. And the only way to stop it is to go to the ER, get IV fluids, get IV Zofran, because it gets to the point where you can't keep the physical medicine down, so it doesn't actually help you. So I reached that point again. I didn't know what to do because I couldn't go get more Zofran. I tried, but they wouldn't refill my prescription. So I basically just tried to survive until I could get to my 10-week appointment. But when I got to 9 weeks, that was the worst week I had. I had not showered in 5 days at this point because I had just become so weak, which I've actually since learned that 9 and 10 weeks are usually the worst for women with HG, and that's when a lot of them consider termination. Now, I'm against it. I would never do that, but I completely understand why women feel like they have to make that decision, because you have to think, if you don't survive, your baby doesn't survive. So you really have to make a really tough decision, because unfortunately some women really do not get the care that they need, so they feel like that's the only option. There's so much I could say about how poorly women with this condition are treated. There have been many cases where women have been told that it's in their head, they have an eating disorder, and doctors just don't, they're so uneducated about it because it's just an under-researched condition, unfortunately. I couldn't work anymore because I have to stare at a laptop, and looking at any sort of screen, like my phone, TV, laptop, anything, the movement of like scrolling made me nauseous and it would make me throw up. So I couldn't watch TV, I couldn't read books, mainly because I couldn't see them because I was losing my vision. I just played like soft music and laid in bed and cried, basically. That's all I did. But anyways, when I was 9 weeks pregnant, I had a day where I had actually scheduled an appointment to go to get IV therapy out of pocket. There's like it's like a Botox clinic, but they do IV therapy there. And I was just going to get a banana bag because I couldn't keep down a prenatal and I wanted to get some sort of vitamins. But I literally, at this point, I couldn't walk. I was losing my vision. My hair was falling out in clumps. I couldn't eat, couldn't keep anything down, couldn't drink any water. I was literally crawling to the bathroom and I had a trash can in my hand 24/7. I remember my mom was supposed to pick me up to take me to this appointment at noon, but I could not stop throwing up. It was constant. And I just kept telling my husband and my mom, I was like, I don't think I can actually make it there because I couldn't move. But I knew I needed it. So my husband carried me to the car and I was throwing up on the way there. And once I got there, got in the chair and got the banana bag, it's hard to explain, but I felt worse. I don't know if my body just couldn't like properly absorb it or what, but the lady who administered it saw the condition that I was in and actually called my OB and was like, you need to take her seriously. This is not just morning sickness. They called an ambulance to take me to the ER, hoping that if I went that way, they would immediately get me a room, but this hospital was ghetto, y'all. I had to wait for like 8 hours before I got a room, and once again, laying on the floor in the ER because I couldn't sit up. I hadn't eaten anything in almost 72 hours by the time I had got to the ER. They gave me IV fluids, Phenergan, Zofran, all the works, and I felt like a functioning human again. But once again, I got a 4-day prescription for Zofran. It ran out and I was back at square one. But then I actually went to my 10-week appointment to get my first ultrasound, and they saw that I had lost 21 pounds in the span of 4 weeks. So at this point, they finally were like, oh, well, you have HG. Like, I didn't even get the diagnosis, Hyperemesis gravidarum, until it had gotten to that point. So I left my 10-week appointment and immediately went to the hospital to be admitted. Stayed there for a week. And that was honestly amazing because I did not throw up the entire time I was at the hospital because I was so heavily medicated. They finally got me back to the point where I could eat and keep it down. They found a regimen that worked for me. They put in a PICC line so that I could go and get IV therapy 3 times a week. So after I left, I stayed on that regimen. When I left the hospital, I had a doctor that actually had made some calls to all the pharmacies in my area to see what the cheapest was to pay out of pocket for Zofran because my insurance just wouldn't budge on that. So I literally paid out of pocket for Zofran for the remainder of my pregnancy. I know some people can wean off of the Zofran by the 2nd trimester. I never even tried, honestly, because I was just too traumatized by what happened every time I got off of it. So I literally was so dependent on that from the time I got pregnant until delivery. They even gave me Zofran while I was in labor. So like I mentioned, I was getting IV therapy 3 times a week, just fluids and IV Zofran. And once a week, I was getting a banana bag. And one thing I didn't know before this was that they can't just give you a banana bag in like an hour. It was like a custom mix that they made for me in the bag of like certain vitamins that I needed. It takes 8 hours for them to administer it. So I spent 8 hours every single Monday sitting in a hospital bed. It was a full-time job just trying to not throw up. So I got my PICC line removed at 26 weeks pregnant. I had a doctor that had advised me to keep it the entire pregnancy in case my HG ramped back up again in the 3rd trimester, so that's pretty common. But I honestly was just so sick of it, and I was having some like nerve issues where it was like hitting a nerve in my right arm and I couldn't feel my thumb sometimes, and that was just making me nervous. So I got rid of it, stopped getting the IVs. I did have some pretty bad days in my 3rd trimester where the nausea was just really bad. I went to the hospital a couple more times for fluids, but it was nowhere near as bad as the 1st trimester. So, constipation. That is one of the really unfortunate side effects of Zofran. I would rather give birth 20 times over again than experience the pain of Zofran constipation. So I had to do enemas every 2 days. Didn't even know what those were before I got pregnant. Never want to do them again. But I had a routine because Zofran literally, it just makes your digestive system just stop. Like it doesn't work on its own. And I became dependent on enemas too to poop. I would have to lay on the floor because I felt like I was going to pass out. It was the only thing that got things moving though. Like I know some people will take like a stimulant orally, but I can't do those. Like I'm really, really sensitive to those. So there were a lot of things that I had to buy to kind of try to help with the constipation. Like I was buying magnesium sulfate. I was drinking greens, Epsom salt baths, really anything that I could think of that would help. And nothing really did. But that's one of the annoying parts about HG is like one medication helps one thing, but then it causes another thing. And so you just have to keep taking all of these medications to medicate another problem that this medication caused. But fast forward to delivery, I don't really remember a lot about that because I was hardly conscious. But what they say about the nausea being gone the second that you deliver is very true. I know some people don't experience that immediate relief, but I did, and I'm super grateful for that. I do still get nausea, especially around my period, and I struggle with some pretty bad food PTSD. There's a lot of things that I don't know if I'll ever be able to eat again just because there were so many things that I threw up while I was pregnant. and it's just not appetizing to me anymore. It is amazing to me that my daughter survived like during that first trimester, because over the course of my entire first trimester, I probably ate 1,000 calories total. I literally just lived off of whatever would stay down at that time in very, very small amounts. HG was definitely the most traumatic thing I've ever gone through. And I don't know if I'll ever be ready to experience that again, because unfortunately, there's a 95% reoccurrence rate. And it sucks because I do want more kids, but I also have to think about the fact that I have to be able to take care of the one that I have currently. And if my second pregnancy, if I do decide to get pregnant again, is anything like my first, I won't physically be able to take care of myself or my child. The hardest part about HG for me was the isolation. Nobody understands it, but imagine having the worst stomach bug. So you can't go anywhere and you can't invite people over because you're just vomiting constantly and nobody wants to be around that. So I missed everything basically for 9 months. And because people don't really know the extent of HG, they don't know how to help you. Like the little comments about, have you tried this? Have you tried this? It became annoying after a while because, I promise you, we've tried all the things, all of the holistic remedies, all of the medications, and nothing really works. But I will say, as traumatizing as it was, I learned a lot from it. The biggest thing being not to take anything for granted. Like, I literally wrote a list when I was really, really struggling of things that I would never take for granted again after getting to the other side of HG. And a lot of those things are just simple, mundane things that we don't think about, like brushing our teeth or being able to move, like walk, being able to eat, being able to shower, just little things like that. It really does not take a lot to make me happy now, because I just constantly compare my life to what it looked like then, when I literally could not do anything but stare at a wall all day long. I wouldn't change anything because I got my daughter out of it, and she is my biggest blessing, and I would go through it 20 times again for her. But anyway, if you are currently struggling with HG, I'm sorry, it sucks so bad. I joined an online support group when I was going through it, and that really helped me a lot. And like I said, videos like this, the ones that do exist, they helped me feel a little less alone, so I hope it does that for you. You can do it. It is temporary. Even if you live with some side effects for the rest of your life, it will not be anywhere near as bad as it is right now as soon as you have that baby. HG survivors are the strongest people on the planet. You just have to take it one day at a time.